It's about finding those threads of connection so that we deepen what a Green New Deal actually means, and everybody is at the table.
I'm excited for this conversation today with award-winning journalist, columnist, and New York Times bestselling author, Naomi Klein, who's here today to talk about her new book, On Fire: The Burning Case for a Green New Deal. I read your book. I really enjoyed it. It was both deep and intense, but then also uplifting at the same time. This book consists of essays that you've written back since 2010. Why make the book now?
I have been writing for a long time, as you see in the book, about the need for a Green New Deal style approach to the climate crisis. Also, an approach to the crisis of economic inequality, of racial and gender exclusion, that is really about, if we need to change the building blocks of our society to get off fossil fuels, which we know we need to do, then why wouldn't we seize that opportunity to redress a lot of things that are not working in our current economy? For too long, I think the approaches have tended to make people feel like it's all going to be about giving things up. So people have really been fearful of taking this crisis seriously. Now, more and more people aren't denying the reality, that we understand that this is happening now. All the polls show it. There's a lot of urgency, and there are different approaches. And so a Green New Deal is an approach that says, climate change isn't the only crisis we face. We face a crisis of inequality, and so let's multitask.
And how do you suppose that we achieve that and get that momentum to really create that level of systematic change?
I think it's significant that the Green New Deal takes its name in part from the original New Deal, from FDR's New Deal introduced in the 1930s, which is an example of a time when the US economy, the US society changed very, very rapidly over a decade. And that decade is important because what climate scientists have told us is that we need to fundamentally change our economy to get off fossil fuels in a big way in a decade. So in the original New Deal, you had everything from introducing unemployment insurance to breaking up the banks to planting 2.3 billion trees to all of these infrastructure and relief programs, electrifying rural America. It shows us actually that it is possible to have this kind of punctuated transformation. So not like a piecemeal, like we're just going to deal with pollution, but this kind of multitasking big picture shift.
And do you think the main avenue through which people should get this going is it protesting? Is it voting?
All of that, and I think that that's another lesson from the original New Deal. And the New Deal has lessons for us, both good and bad, because there were a lot of people who were excluded from the benefits of the New Deal. Many African American workers, agricultural workers, domestic workers were excluded from unemployment, Social Security, a lot of the labor protections. Women were excluded in lots of ways. So we need to make sure that we center justice. And I think that the way in which Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Ed Markey drafted the original resolution, talking about the importance of centering the people who are most excluded, have the worst deal in the current economy, need to be part of designing this from day one. Because if we don't center that, if we don't prioritize that, then we have every reason to believe that we will repeat the mistakes of the past. But the other thing we learned from the original New Deal is that, it takes people running for office, it takes people in office who want to be pushed, and it takes people pushing from the outside.
I think we're seeing it with the student-led protests. We're getting that momentum building up, that grassroots. And I want to talk about a specific essay of yours, Stop Trying to Save the World All by Yourself.
Sure.
And the reason why I bring it up is because I host a series, One Small Step. And so we're trying to empower people, take that one small step. It might be learning how to compost, donating your clothes or whatever.
Yeah.
And you argue that those steps aren't enough and that you shouldn't be hung up on being the best, that type of environmental activist, I guess. So what do you think the steps that people should take in your lens? Because at the same time, you are asking people to protest and go out in the streets or vote, etc.
Yeah. So I think that the big take home is we need to join movements. We need to find our strength beyond our individual consumer power. Our main source of power in a capitalist economy is what we buy or choose not to buy, or how we consume, what our lifestyle is. And look, I think we should do the things that are necessary to lower our personal carbon emissions, but we have to be honest about the scale of change and the speed of change that we're actually talking about. We are talking about a crisis that is global. We are talking about getting to 100% renewable energy, a 100% renewable economy in just over a decade. That's why we need to think big. That's why we need to look at these moments in history where it was possible for people to achieve that level of change. That's why I think even though the original New Deal is a flawed historical analogy because there were huge errors that were made and big exclusions, what I encounter most when I talk to people about climate change is not a denial of the science, but a feeling like we'll never do it. We're too selfish. We're too individualistic, right? And people have absorbed that message so much that now there's a kind of a feeling of inevitability of like, oh, the apocalypse is coming. I may as well just sort of either enjoy myself on the way down or hoard things or whatever it is. And so I think it is so important for us to take inspiration from those examples in history that show actually we are capable of being so much stronger when we organize it. And if we think about why it is that you and I are sitting here talking about the Green New Deal, it is because a group of activists in the Sunrise Movement, young people, occupied the office of Nancy Pelosi after the midterm elections. And they brought this demand that was inspired by grassroots activists in the environmental justice movement for many, many, many years who have been calling for a response to the climate crisis. And they were met by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who visited the occupation of the office, and other members of the, what's sometimes called the squad. And so you had that pincer, right? And lo and behold, it's changed the debate. In less than a year, this is now the climate policy that we're talking about in this country, that the majority of the candidates vying to lead the Democratic Party have said that they support, and that shows the power of activism. So this is not to say don't compost, but don't mistake that for the scale of change that is necessary.
In the book you say, we mistake like capitalism with like human nature.
Right.
And I was reading that and I'm like, wow, that's so true because that's the messaging that we're told, but we can organize and we can, obviously we've seen political change happening in the last year.
Right.
And some of these essays are 10 years old, and I think it's really interesting to see what was the focus. Do you think that we are kind of coming to a place where we're going to see a lot of this stuff actually come to fruition? And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the other reason why I organized the essays in order, because that shows a couple of things, right? It shows that the climate crisis is moving, right? So, in the 10 years that I've been writing about this crisis, we've lost the Great Barrier Reef. We have lost much of the Arctic's summer sea ice. We're losing the Amazon as we speak. So this isn't a crisis that just stays still as we talk and fail to act. It moves, it gets worse. If we want to understand why we fail to act, we have to look at the fact that this crisis landed on our laps at the height of sort of Reaganomics and Thatcherism. We were deregulating the market. We were privatizing almost every aspect of our economy. It was this celebration of hyper-individualism. So of course we didn't do what was necessary, because this crisis demands that we invest in the public sphere. It demands that we actually take some control of the kind of economy that we want. With your generation as opposed to mine, their entire adulthood has been in the aftermath of the financial crisis. And there's an understanding that this economic system that has produced the climate crisis is producing so many other crises, housing crises, job precarity, the gig economy, all of this, tech companies that really do not have our best interests at heart. People of that generation are not afraid of change, are not afraid of talking about systemic change because they understand the benefits. And this is, why I think that those small things that you talk about are worth talking about as well, because I think so much of the messaging, the counter messaging that you get from the right on this is, oh, your life is going to be terrible if you do these things, right? And I think what is that when we do a lot of these things, if we're privileged enough to live, in cities that allow us to bike and that have public transit, and and we don't live in a food desert, and we have to understand that these are privileges. Yeah. If we do that, we actually realize that we're healthier, we're happier,
right.
Like life doesn't end.
It's enriching. It's very enriching.
Right.
It really is.
And so that, I think, gives us a kind of a deeper sort of body knowledge when people come and say, oh, it's the end of the world. People just want to send you back to the dark ages. I think people will be more confident in going, no, actually, this is a better way of life. We're going to be happier, especially if we invest in making sure that everybody has access to nature, everybody has access to the arts, everybody has access to public transit. This isn't something that is just for wealthy people living in cities.
In your book, you go into some of the fears we might want to have about the right, like climate barbarism, and also just like this idea of shutting down the borders and using the climate as an excuse for that. How do we even counteract that in the public narrative?
In the book, I talk about 3 fires, right? The climate fires, the fires of the climate movement, which is like rising to face this challenge, like the climate strikers and the Sunrise Movement. But there is this other fire, which is, in the book I call it the fires of hate or the fires of fascism, where we are seeing responses to ecological breakdown and also to economic breakdown and feelings of sort of precarity and insecurity. And figures like Trump, but not just Trump, Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, Duterte in the Philippines, like a rise of these strongmen figures who play on those feelings of insecurity to say, look, we're just going to protect our own. We're going to lock down our borders. This really, really explicit, very dangerous worldview being articulated of just, well, is it so bad if there's like fewer people on Earth? Is it, and maybe this is some sort of cleansing. Maybe this is God's work. And we've also seen 2 mass shooters in the past 8 months, one in Christchurch, New Zealand, one in El Paso, Texas, who self-identified as eco-fascists. And this was part of why they were targeting people they perceived as immigrants. If we stay on the business as usual road, if we just pretend nothing's happening, if we're just sort of let's just keep shopping and I don't want to deal with this, that takes us to a very radical place. It takes us to a very radical place physically in terms of what happens to our planet. But it also takes us to a very radical place politically. So if we don't want to go do that road, and I really don't think really think most of us don't want to go end up in that place, then we have to change a whole lot about how our economy and society works. We have to embrace a change that we actually design, that doesn't just happen because we weren't willing to change.
Where do we go from here? What are the steps that we can take?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously 2020 is a big issue. We don't want an administration another 4 years of not believe in climate. What can our audience do?
This is going to be a fight because there's a lot of money on the line. And so we need somebody who is up for that fight. The other thing we need to do is we need to build that outside power at the same time. And, this is not about saying, if your movement isn't climate, just drop it, right? And focus on climate. If you're a migrant justice activist, of course you know that climate is one of the drivers of migration, right? And if you're a Black Lives Matter activist, of course the mentality that treats Black people as if they're disposable in the streets of this country is the same mentality that is allowing countries where a majority of Black people live to suffer the most under the climate crisis. It is the same mentality. So we all, I think, just need to do a better job of connecting the dots because the dots are there to be connected. So it isn't about drop everything, join this. It's about finding those threads of connection so that we deepen what a Green New Deal actually means, and everybody is at the table.
Makes so much sense. Well, thank you so much for being here today. This was a wonderful conversation. I personally learned so much. And if you haven't already, check out her book, On Fire, The Burning Case for a Green New Deal. Thank you.
Thank you so much.